What's going on, peeps? Box Star Forum. It's your boy Terry L. Back at y'all again with another one exclusive. This podcast is presented by REKA, R-E-K-A Property Management. Like I say, special shout out to Doug Fuku, chairman of REKA Property Management. And for all the support, we thank him kindly. Please subscribe to the channel. You know we keep it fresh. We talk sense, no nonsense. Let's get right into it. Part 2 of this podcast, we are talking about the big fight coming up, Saturday, October 9th, 2021, Vegas. You know it's the one between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. Now, I've recently been listening to interviews by Jeff Mayweather. I'm a big fan of the Mayweather camp, and of course, Jeff Mayweather talks a lot of sense when it comes to boxing. He's an old guy. This other guy I'm going to refer to, but I still got time for him because he's been in the game for so long. He's an OG. Bob Arum. I listened to a recent interview about Bob Arum. Sugar Hill also, who is Tyson Fury. Sugar Hill Stewart, who's also Tyson Fury's trainer. And obviously from the Manny Stewart, one of my favorite trainers of all times. Rest in peace, Emmanuel Stewart from his family. Tyson Fury, and of course, Deontay Wilder. And listen to these several interviews. I try to generate my opinion based on some of the boxing experts. I've listened to a lot of boxing experts who have given their prediction on this particular fight. The good thing about predictions is it's almost like when you listen to experts, it's like an educated opinion of what may happen. Obviously, on the night in boxing, or in any sporting event, on the night, under the lights, when things get heated, in the heat of the moment, tensions flying everywhere, you're competing, and one competitor against another competitor, anything can happen. Sometimes the unexpected happens, or sometimes dreams come true, the underdog wins out, whatever. But in boxing, especially heavyweight boxing, it can be so unpredictable that it's almost not even worth predicting sometimes, because as we saw with the Joshua Usyk fight, and I recently did a podcast about that, it's just not only is it unpredictable, but sometimes things happen in boxing. You'd be like, man, where did that come from? Or what's going on here? Or, with the Joshua thing, it was almost like you saw two different fighters in the ring. You saw a Joshua in the ring that, you knew he wasn't the best mover, but you was wondering why he wasn't applying certain skill sets and certain levels of aggression that could have dominated the fight in his favor. And then you saw Usyk fight almost a fight that, he could fight, he could box, but you didn't think he was going to put it on Joshua the way he did. So sometimes under the lights, these things happen. And with boxing, especially heavyweight boxing, they always say one punch can change a fight. Now, that is especially true in heavyweight boxing because they're big guys. And because they're big guys with 10-ounce gloves, once they lay their hands on you, it hurts. And you get rocked the wrong way, or your eyes move a certain way, and the boxer sees that and they're going for the kill. And next thing you know, the fight's over. So anything can happen in boxing. Now, that being said, let's get right into it in terms of the analysis of this fight, or the predictions of this fight. Now, I'll start with the Tyson Fury camp, or the Tyson Fury supporters, or the people who are predicting Tyson Fury to win. I've already mentioned about big guys. Heavyweights are big guys. Now, Tyson Fury is a big man. There's a lot of man there. He walks around normally 300 some plus pounds. That's his walk around weight. He's 6'9". He's only a few inches away from being a 7-footer. He's a long guy, big guy with a hell of a reach. But what's really impressive about Tyson Fury, which all his supporters point to, and I've said it in the past and have no problem saying it now, he can move. For someone his size, he's very nimble on his feet. It's almost like he's a middleweight the way he moves sometimes, or a light heavyweight, the way he moves on his feet. So he's very nimble. He's elusive. He's awkward. He's gangly. He uses his boxing skills sometimes in an impeccable fashion. And his boxing IQ is also quite good. It's actually very good. Some will say damn near excellent. sometimes whether he could be bothered or not. Like in his previous fights, like especially the tune-up fights he had before Deontay Wilder, Deontay judged him based on those tune-up fights. And a lot of time in boxing, is sometimes the worst thing you can do by judging a fighter based on the fights he had prior to fighting you. Because a lot of fighters sometimes fight based on the level of opposition. And Tyson Fury is definitely one of those guys. Because before Tyson Fury fought Klitschko, we were trying to think of who he fought that made any sense for him to even warrant to fight Klitschko. And so a lot of people were writing him off based on his previous wins and the fact that he got dropped by a cruiserweight in Cunningham, and they thought, oh, this guy's light in the ass for a big guy. He's got a glass chin, whoop-de-whoop-de-whoop. And then he goes and then he completely outclasses Klitschko. So when he fought Deontay Wilder, and I'll say it again, I said it before, I was worried for Deontay taking this fight because I knew Tyson Fury could box. And it's like Deontay Wilder, I wouldn't say he's like a deer with headlights on. He freezes up, but it's almost like he allows a boxer to box him because he has that neutralizer, that beautiful right hand that Mark Brilliant taught him, but he has speed and power in that hand. So sometimes when some people get knocked out, it isn't necessarily the power of the punch, it's the speed of the punch, the velocity of how fast that power is traveling. In a fitness terminology, it's, you can think of plyometrics. It's speed and distance measured in a very short period of time, or in a time frame or a space. So therefore, with boxing, when you throw a powerful punch really quickly, and you don't see the punch coming a lot of times, boxers don't see it coming. If they're not ready for it mentally and physically, that's why they buckle and they go all over the place. And that's what gets Tyson Fury into trouble, is when he gets a bit lax in the fight. Maybe lets his guard down, maybe stops, maybe gets switched off, which happens in boxing with a lot of boxers. And that's what happened in the first fight. He got flattened in the second, the 12th round, as we know, and he got up miraculously from that second knockdown. But even in the first knockdown, it was like a flash knockdown. And for a big guy, that's a lot of a man to hit the deck. Now, what his supporters, Tyson Fury supporters, rightfully point to is Tyson Fury has this undeniable belief in himself. And this undeniable belief he has in himself is based on the fact that he knows what he can do in the ring. These are not things that he just picked up just by watching a YouTube video. He's been doing this a long time. Another thing people underestimate is that traveling community, the travelers, what some people call them gypsies, or he calls himself the Gypsy King. But these guys can fight. They've been fighting since they came out the womb. I was talking to a good friend of mine, Ken, the owner of Boxfit UK, and he was saying that, man, you know, a lot of these guys fight. The terminology that Ken used was, a lot of these guys fight the minute they learn how to put their hands up. So however young that may be, 3 years old, whatever, they are fighting people. So when you hear Tyson Fury say he's a fighting man, what he's saying is that he's been fighting all his life. And because they're from a traveling community, i.e. they're a minority of the general population, and they are judged sometimes for the wrong reasons. And so they have to fight for whatever reason they fight for. Not all bad things, but sometimes it ain't great, but they are fighters. Within themselves, they are fighters. They fight each other. So they are fighting people. And when you are fighting someone who is a fighting person, and he takes that skill set, that ingrained mentality that he has from a young kid, and he polishes that and refines that in the sport of boxing, in the sweet science, it can be a very, very beautiful and dangerous thing, because he's someone 6'9" who can box. Put aside whether you like the guy or you're not, he's not your favorite or whatever you might think of him. This guy, for his size, he can flat out box, okay? And is what I said in my post-fight podcast about the Alexander Usyk Anthony Joshua fight. I never understood why Joshua's corner, or even Joshua himself, thought it was a good idea to box a boxer. I know he considers himself a boxer puncher or boxer fighter, but a lot of people who have watched Joshua's fights over the last 4 or 5 performances, they haven't seen a killer instinct in him. And he's a very nice guy outside the ring. He's probably a nice guy inside the ring as well. But although he has that knockout ability, it's not a concussion, devilish, demonic knockout artist like your Tysons or your Ken Nortons or your Evander Holyfields even, or your Lennox Lewis even, or even Deontay Wilder. He isn't in that level of, and there's levels to boxing, but he isn't in that level of knockout artist, although he has a very high knockout ratio. And in the fights that Joshua have lost, just talk about Joshua for a minute, when he loses clearly. It's not even a debate on how or why he lost. He was just simply outclassed, i.e. the Andy Ruiz Jr. first fight, and now in the Alexander Usyk fight. And it's almost like something leaves and it doesn't come back. Now with Deontay Wilder, even though he lost to Tyson Fury, some would say the first two fights, but the first fight was a draw. Second fight, he clearly lost. He still has that killer instinct, and he still has that killer mentality. He's still talking about knock this guy out. And knockout artists always say that, irrespective of what has happened before, what they may be going through in their lives, what's going on in their head, they still revert back to what they are, knockout specialists. And even Tyson Fury said, I may knock him out, I may box him for 12 rounds, depends how I'm feeling tonight. So some people have that ingrained within them, and they talk about it, and even Dillian White has it. He has that almost like that menacing instinct that they will just take you out whenever they had a chance, and they ain't gonna play with it. So I'm not saying Anthony Joshua doesn't, but just to refer to the Anthony Joshua situation, I wouldn't say he's in that level of the aforementioned. Now back to the Tyson Fury analysis in this part 2 podcast, I just feel that Tyson Fury, not only having this undeniable belief in himself, but I think what he has is something special as a heavyweight fighter. He boxes very, very well for someone his size. And he could go inside, outside. He could box inside, outside, on the front foot, on the back foot. His movement laterally is good. And, he can mix it up. He throws punches and bunches. His head movement, the way he reads the punches, he set traps. He could apply pressure, as we saw in the second fight, the Deontay Wilder fight. He applied pressure. He just bullied the bully. But Jeff Mayweather said something that was very, very clever in his analysis of, or his prediction of this fight, this up-and-coming third trilogy fight. It wasn't like Deontay Wilder got beat with anything technical in the second fight. What Deontay Wilder got beaten with, what Tyson Fury literally beat Deontay Wilder with, was strategy. He had a strategy that worked. And it's almost as if we didn't really know what Deontay's strategy was in the second fight. And if there was a strategy, once Tyson applied his strategy, that was all you needed to know. And, even leaning on the man, once a guy, I go back to the size of Tyson Fury. That's a big man leaning on you, a smaller man throughout the fight. And what that does, that tires you out. When that tires you out, you then don't have that much in you to give back, because you're spending most of your energy with whatever strategy you employed to go in there and somehow muscle it with this guy. And that tactic didn't work, if that was a tactic to Deontay Wilder. He never really actually said what his tactic was. So Tyson Fury said, I'm a bully to bully, and that's what exactly he took it to him. And that probably surprised Deontay Wilder. Now, most people here in the UK, as you know, I'm here in London, Northwest London, in the Next Phase studio, the home of Boxstar. Most people in the UK, unsurprisingly, have Tyson Fury winning this fight. And a lot of them have said it's going to happen in stoppage. Only one person I've listened to in the UK has said it could go to points. The people that I speak to privately in my circles, it's 50-50. Some say points, and the others say Tyson Fury by stoppage. So the Tyson Fury supporters revert back to what normally would be the logical thing. The boxer is going to box and probably box Wilder's face off. And that probably will be a very good analysis or prediction to have based on Tyson Fury's ability. So I'm not surprised by that. Bob Arum seems to think that you're going to have a bit of more of the same what happened in the second fight. Well, Bob Arum would hope so, because he would love to see his man win, Tyson Fury, and he would love to see that Tyson Fury not to get in the way of this dangerous fighter in Deontay Wilder, because he always says in his interviews, Deontay Wilder is still a dangerous fighter. And in trilogies, as trilogies go, you know, Ali fought Ken Norton in the trilogy. He fought Frazier, which is probably the best trilogy ever in the sport of boxing. Evander Holyfield fought Riddick Bowe in the trilogy. That was a pretty exciting trilogy. And so trilogies, and then of course Manny Pacquiao fought Manuel Marquez, Juan Manuel Marquez, and they fought more. They actually fought 4 times, but they had a trilogy of their own. There's Ward versus Arturo Gatti. That was a brilliant trilogy as well, brutal. So in boxing, there hasn't been many trilogies, but there has been trilogies. And all the trilogies that I've seen have been excellent trilogies. So yeah, it's not unheard of, okay? In terms of what Fury brings to the table, he brings everything you want to see in a heavyweight boxer. He brings a bit of pizzazz, he brings the talk, he walks the talk, he has great boxing skills, as we've alluded to, and he also can bang for a big man. Let's go to the Wilder side of things. So now, the people that in the United States that talk about Wilder always talk about Wilder with the ability to hurt you that one punch. And as we know in the heavyweight boxing division, as I've always said, and I've said in this podcast, one punch can change a fight in heavyweight boxing. And Wilder only needs one punch. I mean, it literally is that simple. He gets one punch, he connects the right punch, it's good night. You're going to sleep. And Fury is well aware of that. Wilder promises a knockout. As I said before, guys with that knockout mentality or that punches fighters mentality, when they've become knockout specialists, that's all they really talk about. Tyson talked about knockouts because that's all he was, well, not all, but that's what he was well known for. And when you're known as a knockout specialist, that's what people want to see, and that's what you expect to get the people. So this fight is great for the fans, probably more for anybody else, because the fans are getting something very exciting. As I said before, the excitement, the build up to this fight is as good as it was in the previous 2 fights. The excitement was great. The fight was great. The build up was great, and the fight gave you what the build up promised. This fight is no different. I think the build up to this fight actually started the minute the arbitration was ruled in favor of the fight having to happen. And obviously Deontay Wilder winning his arbitration. So to me, that's when the excitement actually happened. And so with Deontay Wilder, I agree with Jeff Mayweather. I think he's going to have to box a little bit in order to have a good chance of winning this fight. To go in there and try to outbox Fury, it's never going to happen. And let's face it. It's like Joshua trying to outbox Alexander Usyk. It's never going to happen. I mean, it looks cute. It sounds good. It might even look good in spots, but it's never going to happen. You're going to have to box in order to put your applied pressure, look for the knockout punch, and get your man out of there. Or beat the snot out of him if you can, and have him in trouble in very pivotal parts of that fight to finish him off. So Deontay Wilder is definitely looking for the knockout. Whether it comes in the 1st or the 10th or the 12th round, that's what he's looking for. And trust me, I think Deontay Wilder will wait all night for it. Very similar to what he did when he fought Ortiz in both fights. He'll wait all night for that knockout punch because he knows it's coming. And when it comes, he realizes that his man is going to go down or go to sleep. Okay? So Jeff Mayweather's analysis was very, very clever. He said that, you know, Deontay's going to have a strategy, but also the thing that worries me about Deontay in this fight is that when you take on a new trainer, okay, the trainer can have all the great stuff in the world. The trainer can give you all the new things to work on. But if you haven't actually worked on that in a fight situation, it isn't the greatest thing of all. It's almost like it could be a curse because you don't know whether it's going to work or not. At least if you had a tune-up fight and you try some new thing and it didn't work, you say, okay, all right, it didn't work, so we're going to go to this. And he's also, another thing that I think that goes against Deontay Wilder in this fight, He's had almost 2 years as a layoff, or 2 years and a bit as a layoff. So the last time they fought was 2019. And it's a long time in any sport, but especially in the sport of boxing. The ring rust. I know he's been training like a madman. He's been sparring. He's been working out. He's been hitting the mitts. He's been doing various things with his trainer and his coaching staff and his fitness staff. And he's always in mint condition. So those two things could go against him, just not having the ring experience to work on the new things that he's picked up with his new trainer, and having maybe a tune-up fight prior to this particular fight. I know that time was probably not on his side, because once the arbitration was made, then he pretty much had to get in shape for this fight. And I know COVID hit, so during the COVID situation, he probably didn't want to take on a fight, especially maybe he wanted to keep himself fresh for this fight, didn't want to take any chances and things of that nature. So I understand that. Also, you hear that Deontay Wilder has bulked up a bit, okay? We wonder if he's gotten too bulky for this fight, because he's given away size anyway to Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury in the first fight, I believe, was 30 to 35 pounds heavier than Deontay Wilder on the night, which arguably to me was Deontay Wilder's best performance in the previous two fights. In the second fight, Deontay Wilder bulked up a bit. I think he got to like 225, and most of that is muscle. And sometimes that plays against you. Just ask Anthony Joshua. Because when you have too much muscle, there's not enough oxygen going into those arms and into the muscles need oxygen. And when you're trying to hold your arms up for 12 rounds and you're hitting someone and you're missing and connecting whatever, or you're tussling with someone, it takes a lot out of you. But if you're too bulky and you're more bulky than you normally have, that could sometimes play against you. I understand why some fighters do it, so they can pack more punch, so they can have, a bit more bang in their punches. It worked for Evander Holyfield for all of his boxing career, so some fighters believe they can do it and get away with it. But some fighters are just special fighters, and for Evander Holyfield, he was just a special fighter. But remember, Evander Holyfield could also box very well, so he didn't have to rely on his knockout punch or his knockout power. So for me, those two things primarily stand out for me as a concern for Deontay Wilder. Not having a tune-up fight prior to this particular fight, and the unknown, whether the stuff he's done with Malik Scott actually works, whether the stuff he's done with Malik Scott is even going to be beneficial for him, whether the stuff he's done with Malik Scott is even going to work in this fight. We don't know, because it's a very, very new thing whenever you have a new trainer. But let's talk about the positives now. The positives are he's a 40-plus fight veteran. His record speaks for itself. He has the highest knockout percentage in all of boxing, in boxing history. He only has the one loss, blemish to his record, to the same opponent that he's fighting now. Prior to that fight, the second fight with Fury, he has put every man he's ever faced on the canvas. He's either knocked him out or he's put him on the canvas. Every person that he's ever fought. No other fighter's ever done that in the heavyweight division, or pretty much almost, I would say, in any division. So he has that in his favor. And he also has this undeniable belief in himself, that he knows that he just needs that one moment of brilliance to connect that right punch and to get his man out of there. Excuse me. So it's a very dangerous proposition for the opponent to know that this dangerous puncher is on the other side of me in the squared circle. So does he have a chance? Of course, he has more than a puncher's chance. But I believe Jeff Mayweather had it right. He has to have a different strategy, and it has to be a plan B. If the current strategy doesn't work, or the plan A doesn't work, he has to have a plan B. I would even say against Tyson Fury, you got to have a plan C too, because Tyson Fury to me is just that clever, and he's that resilient. Now, the obvious blemish against Deontay Wilder in this situation is when you have a new trainer. When you've only known one way to fight pretty much all of your career, having a new trainer at this stage in your life, I'm not sure how effective it's actually going to be for him going forward. I'm not sure whether or not you can change that much in a fighter who's this experienced, who has been prone to do things a certain way throughout his entire boxing career. Can he box? Of course he can box. Don't forget, he was an Olympiad. He won a bronze medal in the Olympics. He made the U.S. Olympics team. And against the odds, when no one thought he could actually box, he can actually box. He just doesn't have the high caliber level of boxing compared to, the previous the four boxers I'm going to mention now: Alexander Usyk, Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury. Out of those boxers, Deontay Wilder is below those boxers in terms of boxing ability. Where Deontay Wilder reigns supreme of all these boxers is his knockout ability. But this is boxing. And in boxing, there are times when you just have to apply your boxing skills. So boxing skill sets don't stand in Deontay Wilder's favor. But he has to box a little bit. The boxing skills that he had, he's going to have to use those on the night. He's a better athlete than Tyson Fury. So his athleticism is going to have to be on point on the night in order to get that strap, win that belt back. If he doesn't do that, it could possibly go on points. That's my prediction. I believe it could go to 12 rounds. And if it goes to 12 rounds, that doesn't stand in Deontay Wilder's favor, especially the fact that he's no longer the belt holder. That the belt holder is Tyson Fury. Unless he absolutely beats the absolute snot out of Tyson Fury for 12 rounds or most of the latter rounds, then he might have a chance of winning that belt back. And then you might hit a conspiracy theory saying it was a robbery. I think if Tyson Fury loses, they'll call for a fourth fight. Tyson Fury has already said that there won't be a fourth fight because he just believes he's going to win this fight. My heart, as always, has been Wilder. My boxing brain, which always seems to be separated from my heart in most cases, says Tyson Fury. That's my prediction based on watching the previous two fights. That's my prediction. Listen to the people that I respect in the boxing game. As I mentioned, I definitely have a lot of respect for Jeff Mayweather and the Mayweather camp. Sugar Hill Stewart, I believe, is a good coach, and I definitely like to listen to what he says. I've heard both fighters, Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, Mr. Bob Arum, and a few others, quite a few others, mostly in favor of Tyson Fury. But I think that because Deontay Wilder knows that everything is stacked against him. I heard an analogy or an expression earlier that I haven't heard for a while, that when a man is backed up against a wall and he's a fighter and he's got nothing else but to come forward, that could bring out the best in a man. And in this case, for the first time in a long time, I think in Deontay Wilder's career, he's going to have to revert back to that man with his back against the wall and come out with everything he knows and everything he has. And that's where you may see a very dangerous Deontay Wilder. I was talking to a Brit earlier, and he was saying that his heart says Fury, but his head says Wilder. He's actually the only Brit I've actually spoken to that's actually even said that. Everyone else I speak to has all said, my heart says Fury, my head says Fury. I know Wilder's dangerous, but I can't see how Wilder does anything different. So this guy is actually saying just the opposite. So I'm going to sign up by saying that I'm going to stick to my guns. My heart says Wilder. My head says Fury. I'll be pleasantly surprised if Deontay Wilder wins, but I won't be surprised if Fury wins. And I won't even be mad or upset because it's probably what I would expect to happen, Fury to win on points. What's your prediction? What do you think? Leave your comments, hit the like and subscribe button, support the channel. As you know, Boxstar Forum is putting out all the fresh content, and we're paying homage to fighters past, present, and future, pros and amateurs, some of the unknown fighters, some of the young up-and-coming fighters, and some of the fighters that you know of. Remember, in boxing, you have an opinion, and your opinion matters. That's all I got for now. Until the next time, Enjoy the fight. Let me know what you think of the fight. And let's hope it's a very exciting fight, which I think it is. I'm out for now. Holla back. Peace.